Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And good morning, Instagram fam, friends and followers of as-Saafiy, and welcome to another episode of Revert Reflections. And today we'd like to conclude our discussion on reflecting on marriage. And I'd like to conclude it by talking about the undesirable but sometimes necessary ending of a marriage. I want to say, brothers and sisters, that people don't generally get married to get divorced. That is not the intention of most people when they get married. Most people, when they get married, they intend to stay married. They want it to work out. But in the course of being married, they discover that they and their spouse are incompatible. Or they inadvertently make critical errors that undermine the relationship. That we're all human, and sometimes we are actually vested. We want to make our marriage work, but for whatever reason, maybe because of lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, lack of preparedness, we make critical errors. And those errors over time, they erode some of the necessary emotional traits. You know, the certain critical aspects of marriage or critical features of marriage that will make it work. And as a consequence, for example, sometimes we do things that erode trust. We do things that make it impossible for our spouse to be attracted to us, to love us, etc. Whatever the case may be, a couple may reach the conclusion that their relationship is untenable. It's not something that they can continue in. And when that happens, it is fundamentally, and I don't use that word lightly, it is fundamentally important from the Islamic perspective. And this is important too to underscore from the Islamic perspective, because many of us, when we approach marriage and when we approach divorce, we do so totally ignoring what Islam says about these two things. And so it is fundamentally important from the Islamic perspective, if we are Muslims who want to live our lives comprehensively as Muslims, it is fundamentally important from the Islamic perspective that we bear a few things in mind. The first of these is that we have to fear Allah. We have to fear Allah and be ever mindful of His watchful eye. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us and He is recording everything that we do. You're going to notice there is a surah in the Quran called Surah At-Talaq. It is the 65th chapter of the Quran. And if you read that chapter and you read it thoughtfully, you're going to find that repeatedly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala either commands the believers in a surah entitled At-Talaq, the chapter of divorce. He repeatedly either commands the believers to have fear of Allah, or He praises the people who fear Allah. But throughout the surah, He is encouraging us to be fearful of Him, to be mindful of Him, to be conscious of Him in a chapter entitled At-Talaq, divorce. Why is that? The scholars have said it is because the tendency of man during the process of divorce is to forget about Allah, to ignore what Allah has said, and not to fear Him. And so it is important for us to be reminded that even in this situation where emotions are running high, we have to be mindful of Allah and we have to mind the law of Allah. And so it is critically important, brothers and sisters, fundamentally important that when we reach that point where our marriage is untenable, that we have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, mind the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and make sure that we go through this process in a way that pleases Allah. Now we turn this bad thing into a blessing in disguise, into a good thing, a way that we can draw closer to Allah because we're complying with the law of Allah. But another important, fundamentally important point is that we have to be rational and reasonable. And we can't let our emotions get the best of us. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, a man came to him and he said, Ya Rasulullah, awsini. He said, O Messenger of Allah, he said, give me some advice. And the Prophet ﷺ, he responded, he said, La taghdab. So the man said, awsini. The Prophet said, don't get angry. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. So the man said, awsini. He said, okay, advise me. And the Prophet said, La taghdab. And the man said, awsini. Every time the man said, advise me, the Prophet would say, don't get angry. And he kept repeating it and kept repeating it and kept stressing and emphasizing it. And what did the Prophet mean when he said, don't get angry? He meant, don't let your emotions get the best of you. That you have to, O believer, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of what is happening around you, you have to control your emotions, rein your emotions in. You cannot be, you cannot let the tail wag the dog. You can't let your emotions control you. You have to control your emotions. You have to be in control. Last but not least, and this is, I think, one of the most important advices I can give on this topic, and that is, do not suddenly and conveniently forget the good times, the mutual kindnesses and favors, and the love you shared with your former or soon-to-be former spouse. There is a statement in Arabic that is made, and it says, إذا كان الحب يعمي المساوي فالبغض يعمي المحاسن. Basically, the meaning is that love blinds a person from seeing faults, while bitterness blinds a person from seeing virtues. This is important. This is a true statement, and it's something that we all have to reflect upon regarding our own personal realities. When you like somebody, you can overlook, you don't see the red flags. You don't see the things that are wrong with them. And you have hearts in your eyes, and that's all you see is the good. But when you don't like them, when you're angry with them, when you're upset with them, when you want to divorce them, all you can see is the bad. You just totally ignore, overlook, you intentionally fail to see the good. When things are going good, we have only good things to say. But when things are going bad, we only have bad things to say. But the reality, if we're honest, is that there's no such thing as a person who is all bad or all good. Ibn al-Qayyim, he writes, he says that ما خلق الله شرا محضا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not created something which is entirely evil, and that includes the shaitan. Even the shaitan, there's some good in him. If this is the case for the shaitan, how much more so is it true for human beings whom we've shared love with? Is it possible that you have been married to someone and they've never done anything good? They've never said anything kind. They never done anything kind. They never took care of you when you were sick. They never helped you with something that was a challenge or difficult for you. They never gave you anything. They never took you any place. Is that possible? I'm not saying it can't happen, but most of us can't claim that we were married to somebody and we never saw any good from them. And the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us in the hadith, he says, Kullu ibn Adam khata'. He said, every son of Adam makes mistakes. Meaning that there's no one who's all good. So just like there's nobody who's all bad, like Ibn al-Qayyim said, there's also nobody who's all good. People are by nature flawed. There's good and bad. There's good and bad in all of us. So, when divorcing or after a divorce, we have to know that we are wrong. We have to know that we are wrong if every time we speak about our former spouse, we put them down explicitly or implicitly. We unload on them. We have nothing good to say about them. If someone challenges us, tries to, basically set the record straight and says something good that they did or mentions something good about them. Yeah, but they do this or they have this or they're like this. Then we have to contextualize, editorialize, or rewrite history and paint even their good things, even their good deeds, their good qualities. We have to paint them in the worst light. So, yeah, they did this, but they should have done that. Yeah, they did do this act of kindness. Yeah, they did give me this thing, but they should have given me that. Or they didn't give it to me a week before. They should have done it a week earlier. We have to editorialize and say something negative. Even the good things, the virtues, we have to turn them into what? We have to turn them into faults. And when we speak to them, if we're forced to speak to them, interact with them, we are filled with venom and vitriol. Speaking to someone we previously loved with the most hate-filled words, and this is very, very common and very, very unfortunate and very, very un-Islamic, because the Prophet said, he said, whoever believes in Allah, basically saying the sign of a true believer is that they either speak good or remain silent. If you have nothing good to say, then be quiet. It's un-Islamic. Every time we speak to somebody that we used to be in a relationship with and it didn't end well, we have nothing but venom and vitriol. Sometimes we're cursing them out, using, profane language, calling them names. And sometimes these are people not only who we shared love with, but who we share children with. They are the father of a child and we are demeaning and denigrating them. Or they are a mother of our child and we are demeaning and belittling and putting them down. This is the forgetting or intentional omission of favors that Allah prohibits. Underscore the word prohibits, O you who believe in Allah and say you love Allah and you want to obey Allah. Allah prohibits us from forgetting and intentionally omitting the favors that have been between us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَنْسَوْا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. And spouses, do not forget the kindnesses shared between you. And this is from Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd chapter, verse 237. And this is part of what the Prophet ﷺ meant when he said, لَا يَفْرُكْ مُؤْمِنٌ مُؤْمِنًا إِنْ كَرِهَ مِنْهَا خُلُقًا رَضِيَ مِنْهَا آخَرٍ. Let not any believing man despise a believing woman if he dislikes some quality that she has. He is undoubtedly pleased by another. And don't be fooled by the fact that the Prophet specifically said, don't let a believing man despise a believing woman. As if to say it only applies to women. That a man can't say bad things about his former wife or former spouse, but the woman can say bad things about her former spouse. We have to understand that whenever the Prophet says something about men, it's applicable to women. And whenever he says something about women, it's applicable to men, unless we have proof to the contrary. The Prophet is telling us that we're not supposed to despise each other. We're not supposed to intentionally omit the things that we know that they've done that were good because we're mad at them, because we're angry with them, because we have acrimony towards them, because we are full of resentment and we're embittered by the unfortunate ending of the relationship. Brothers and sisters, this is critically important. We're talking about reflecting upon marriage from the Islamic perspective and reflecting upon divorce, the ending of marriage from the Islamic perspective. And many of us who say we're Muslim and consider ourselves pious and devout, when it comes to these issues, we are anything but. And that's something we all have to reflect on. And with that, we bring today's session and this week's sessions to a close. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as always, to make us from those who listen to the talk and follow the best of it. We ask Allah to bless your houses, to bless your spouses, to bless your children, to bless your sources of livelihood and income. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and make you blessed wherever you may be, to shower you with His blessings and to surround you with His protection. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.